Carlson said to the Associated Press he had watched Ramos crash his truck outside the elementary school, take a rifle, and shoot at two people at a funeral home nearby. Ramos then began shooting at the school building before running inside the school about 10 minutes later. According to Carranza, there were no police officers at the school to engage Ramos. Ramos went into the school and began shooting. When police finally did arrive, Carranza said, they didn't do anything at all for about an hour. In fact, parents had to beg the police to save their children. Go in there, one woman said. It was a shocking story. It was the opposite of what authorities had told us for more than 24 hours. So whose version is true? Well, on the last day, videos have emerged corroborating Carranza's version of events. Those videos show police officers with rifles and body armor standing outside the school. It's not clear if the gunman was still shooting at this point, but we do know the gunman was still alive. And yet, instead of going into the school, the police instead worked to keep parents out of the school for a full hour. Watch.
I know that. Turn around and look at
Look, I already know.
Are your kids in there? Are your grandkids in there? No. That's like no. They don't turn around though. You don't want to turn around and look at that poor kid. Look at that poor little kid, that poor baby. You don't understand.
I'm a parent to the beginning.
Are you not there? I would have got him and shot him. You're scared to get shot? I'll go in with all of them. Yeah, I will. Okay.
You're not helping.
Man, that's crazy, bro. They're just standing all outside, bro. There's kids in there still, man. I don't know what kind of parent you are, but half of these parents here, dude, they want to go in there without vests, without guns to get the hit, bro.
It seems apparent that when that video was shot, the gunman was still alive with the firearm in the school with children in the school. Now, a Texas official later suggested on camera that while all of this was happening, some members of law enforcement in Texas went into the school to get their own children out. Is that true? If it is true, it's a moral crime at the very least. In the meantime, we know that police were forcibly keeping parents away from the building. At one point, an officer held a taser at his side. Watch this. Taser, of course, aimed at the parents. Now, one parent called Angeli Rose Gomez told the Wall Street Journal that as soon as she heard about the shooting, she drove 40 miles to the school because she had two sons enrolled and she wanted to save them. Quote, the police were doing nothing, she said. They were just standing outside the fence. They weren't going in there or running anywhere. Now, she immediately complained about this, and when she did, federal marshals put Gomez in handcuffs. Ultimately, they freed her, at which point Gomez, quote, made her distance from the crowd, jumped the school fence, and ran inside to grab her two children. She then ran out of the school with her children. In other words, this mother was cuffed, freed, ran into the school, and still had time to get her kids out as the police stood outside. Now, if that's true, it's a scandal. Today, the police called a press conference to try to explain all of this. Victor Escalon with Texas DPS began by explaining that it might be just a rumor that parents were urging police to go inside the building. Watch.
Is it accurate that eyewitnesses and potentially parents of the students were urging the police to go in while you were waiting for a tactical SWAT team, even that some parents were asking to borrow police armor so they could make a counter-assault on the school?
I have heard that information, but we have not verified that yet. So,
what part haven't you verified?
We have not verified is that a true statement or not, or is it just rumor out there?
Oh, it's a rumor, except it's on video, so it's not at all a rumor, it's a fact. Now, that officer did admit that there was no school resource officer after all. The one we were told had, quote, engaged the gunman. Didn't exist. Watch.
It was reported that a school district police officer confronted the suspect that was making entry. Not accurate. He walked in unobstructed initially. So from the grandmother's house to the bar ditch to the school, into the school, he was not confronted by anybody. to clear the record on that.
So the point is not to point fingers or blame people. Nobody wants a school shooting. Everyone's heart is broken by it. But the authorities are not allowed to lie to us in the aftermath of an event like this. And our federal officials are not allowed to take an event like this, ignore the facts, and then use it to take our constitutional rights away. So what are the facts? Well, here's the news story from Texas DPS. At 11:28 a.m., the shooter crashed his truck outside. He then pulled a gun and began shooting indiscriminately at two people at a funeral home. That confirms what the witness Carranza said. He also shot at the school building. During that time, as you'd expect, people were calling the police. 12 minutes later, at 11:40 a.m., the shooter went inside the building. How'd that happen? Then 4 minutes after that, the police finally went inside the building. So in all, there was a 16-minute gap until the police showed up and responded. So why did that take so long? That is a fair question. In fact, it's a critical question. Even at the Parkland school shooting, when police staged outside as students were being murdered, police wound up inside the building 11 minutes after the shooter. But in this case, it was 16 minutes. Why was that? We have a right to know, but today, police wouldn't say.
There's a 12-minute gap. There's a 12-minute gap from when he crashes his truck to when he enters the school. 12 minutes. What happened in that 12 minutes?
So you got to understand, 11:30 is the information we have at this point that we can confirm. 11:30 a.m. the PD gets we got a crash and a man with a gun. And then you have responding officers. That's what it is. If it's 12 minutes from 11:30 to 11:40, that's the information we have right now. Look, at the end of the day, our job is to report the facts and have those answers. We're not there yet.
So the second the shooting starts anywhere, at any time, things get very confusing. They used to call it the fog of war. It's entirely real. It's hard to figure out exactly what happened when people start getting killed. But on the big questions, it's very obvious immediately. Was there a school resource officer who exchanged fire with the gunman? That's not something you would imagine. That either happened or it didn't, and you would know right away if it happened or it didn't. It didn't happen, but they said it did happen. That's a lie. Why did they lie? Police did say that officers went inside the school for 4 minutes after the suspect, but then they retreated outside the school. And then police did not re-enter the school for another hour. During that time, they say they were waiting for backup, including for some reason, for multiple crisis negotiators. Watch.
Officers are there, the initial officers, they receive gunfire. They don't make entry initially because of the gunfire they're receiving. But we have officers calling for additional resources. Everybody that's in the area, tactical teams. We need equipment. We need specialty equipment. We need body armor. We need precision riflemen, negotiators.
Now, no matter how pro-law enforcement you are, and we are, there's only so much BS you can take in the face of a tragedy like this. We're waiting for specialized equipment. You have an 18-year-old with a firearm and little kids being killed. What kind of specialty equipment do you need? Negotiators, really? As children are being murdered? One 11-year-old child says she smeared herself with a friend's blood to convince the gunman she had already been shot to death. Another fourth grader who survived the shooting said that police told kids inside to call out for help while the shooter was still shooting. Then the gunman killed a student who followed police instructions and called out for help. So if you're wondering why police waited an hour for a negotiator to talk to a gunman who's indiscriminately murdering children, you're not the only one. They were asked about this at the briefing today. Was the door really barricaded? Was it just locked? Police wouldn't respond to a simple question like that. Watch.
What were the officers doing between 11:44 and 12:44?
I got you. Your question? Yes, sir.
Behind that.
You guys have said that he was barricaded. Can you explain to us how he was barricaded and why you guys cannot breach that door?
So I have taken all your questions into consideration. We will be doing updates. We will be doing updates to answer those questions.
So 2 days after this massacre, authorities are slowly admitting that everything they told us was in fact untrue. There was no school resource officer. They're not even sure the door was barricaded. These matter, these questions. If you wanted to stop mass shootings in the future, figuring out how this happened would be the place to start.